Information overload and anxiety. How are they related? Accelerated growth in information production leads to information overload. This affects not only the flow of information, but also our mental health and our relationship with knowledge. We live in a globalized world full of data and information. Therefore, the perception we have of ourselves has changed significantly. This is partly due to the exponential flow of information. It not only makes us aware of what is happening in the world, but also establishes new ways of being and living. This leads, among other things, to information overload and anxiety. In the information society we live in, digitization has been one of the keys to its development. It has created many new means of communication and ways of producing, storing and disseminating information. This has changed our interpersonal relationships and production, education, and entertainment systems. In a world that is increasingly hyper-connected, it is not surprising that information overload or information poisoning has a significant impact on our mental health. Below we will look at the concept of information overload and consider its relationship to anxiety. Information overload. The need to be informed all the time creates anxiety that drives us to want to deal with all the content that is offered to us and that seems so important. This compulsive consumption makes us frustrated when we realize that we cannot process and assimilate all that we would like. Information overload leads to a feeling of anxiety combined with the perception that there is so much information that we cannot easily assimilate, evaluate, organize, manage and select it. This overload creates stress and frustration because we cannot access, understand or utilize the information we need. In other words, we experience intoxication when we receive far more information than we are able to process. In the globalized and hyper-connected world in which we live, this phenomenon is common. Information overload has several symptoms in addition to anxiety and frustration. Disorientation, attention and concentration difficulties, memory problems, indecisiveness and distraction, acceleration, impatience and impulsiveness, poor time management, decreased analytical ability. Overload causes anxiety and a feeling that we cannot assimilate so much information. Reasons. According to Preciado, 2020, the most common causes of information overload are the following. Inexperience or uncertainty. When we need to talk or learn about an unknown topic, the first thing we do is to seek information from sources that are within our reach. However, we do not delve into them. Stress. Because of the many tasks that we perform in a day and the stress that these bring, the time we spend examining the information that we are given is extremely short. Therefore, we are unable to carry out a rigorous and in-depth analysis of the information. Poor quality sources. When we search for information, we tend to use unreliable sources that confuse us with their content. Furthermore, the information is often incomplete. This makes us search for other sources and thus causes an information overload. Lack of criteria when searching for information. Our lack of critical and selective reading of information results in our cognitive system being overloaded with an excess of processed information. It gives us anxiety because of the lack of opportunity to deal with it properly. Excessive caution. This causes us to store information in excess for fear of not finding it again. In fact, the fear of missing out on what is happening or the assimilated information leads us to compulsively process the content, which ends up overloading our cognitive system. The need to know everything. Our desire to know everything drives us to overload ourselves with information in order to possess more knowledge. The relationship between information overload and anxiety. Anxiety is understood as a fear of the threat to a certain value that a person considers to be essential to his existence. May 2000. It is an existential reaction that warns us that the values with which we identify are threatened. In fact, anxiety is our anticipatory response to a fear event or situation that has yet to occur. Information overload and anxiety maintain a reciprocal relationship in which each is able to promote the prominence of the other. If, for example, intellectual life possessing a lot of knowledge is a core value for us, we can end up overloading ourselves with information to know more than we already know. If, on the other hand, we perceive that we are not obtaining the knowledge we want because we are over-processing information, we become anxious. This is because the value we see in knowing everything is being threatened. This anxiety leads us to become more overloaded with information, turning the overload-anxiety cycle into a vicious cycle where both feed off each other. The more we experience overload, the less we will be able to organize and assimilate information. The more anxiety we feel to be updated, to know more about a certain area of knowledge or about what is happening in the world, the more information we will consume. In fact, information overload and anxiety are two sides of the same coin in certain situations. Information overload creates anxiety, impairs analytical capacity and leads to wrong decisions. How to reduce information overload and anxiety. If you suffer from information overload, here are some tips to help you improve your mental health. Make a schedule for your consumption of information. If you make a schedule, you prevent yourself from constantly consuming information from digital platforms. In fact, you should schedule a specific time of day to catch up on information, watch news, or surf social media. Disable notifications. Stop receiving notifications about news all the time so that you are not tempted to look at them. If you receive information every 5 minutes, by the end of the day your brain will be exhausted from so much processing and organizing data. Don't check your mobile phone before going to bed. The light from your cell phone can inhibit the release of melatonin, a hormone associated with sleep induction. Sleeping and resting well is necessary for healthy life, and for the information to be consolidated in your neural networks. Information overload and anxiety are two notable characteristics of today's society, where information consumption has become as intense as other forms of consumption. How much information do you read in a day? Have you ever felt anxious trying to absorb an amount of information that you cannot process,